Okay, hello everybody and welcome to episode 2 of Proud Women. You will notice that we are sadly missing a Katie today because the hay fever demons have claimed her terribly. So we're hoping that Katie Brown will be back with us next week. We're sending her lots of love and good wishes. How's your hay fever been, everyone watching? Has it been hammering? It's been hammering me this year, but hey. Right, let's get on with the show. Terrible. What about you, Katie and Katie? Hay fever?
Yeah, really bad at the moment, but obviously a lot better than Katie B. She's really suffering at the moment. Yeah.
Katie Allen has not only escaped hay fever.
It's not a thing that I have, and I'm incredibly and eternally grateful for that.
And she's just been saying, "Oh, just before we went live, oh look, I look quite brown today, don't
I? Look how tender I look today." Shut up.
No hay fever, and you look sun-kissed. I think you should just get off our broadcast.
I'll jog on.
Yeah. Off you go. How's everybody's week been? Katie Neeves, how's your week been?
It's been a phenomenal week this week. Yeah, I've just come back from Manchester from hosting the Queer Student Awards, and it was such a blast. It was amazing fun. It was such a great crowd, but I was very naughty. Unlike me to be naughty, I know.
But why were you naughty? What did you do?
I was just pushing the boundaries a bit, and the thing is, the audience was loving it, and you know how I love a good audience, and I was just playing up to them, so it just built up, and so I was very naughty, but they did like it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
I'm so glad it went well for you. What about you, Katie Allen, apart from being all tanned and
I haven't hosted any awards this week, so I guess not as exciting. I've had a good week. It's been lovely. It's been sunny. It's been a good week for me too. Thank you.
Excellent. I can't think what I've done this week.
I have nothing to promote. Yeah.
Just busy and boring week. I am keynoting the Business Expo in Twickenham on Wednesday. Hold on, bear with. Thursday next week, though. So if anybody wants to get up early and come to breakfast, you can see me there. Brilliant. Right then. So on with the show. We promised last week that we would cover pronouns. And by the way, before we dig into this, if you're watching this, thank you, Tracy, for confirming it's Thursdays because I'm traveling down there on Wednesday. If you're watching this, regardless of whether you're watching live or on replay, please, can you throw some comments in, whether you're watching this on YouTube, on Facebook, or on LinkedIn, or on anybody's feed. Please drop some comments, drop some love, and give us some shares, because that helps the social channels show these broadcasts to more people. And certainly the feedback we got from last week was this was really needed.
Yeah, I've had some that has been one of the highlights of my week, getting some lovely messages from people saying how much they've enjoyed it and how entertaining we are. And I thought, well, if we want a career change,
They obviously caught us on a good day, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah, we'll try and keep it up.
It's because Katie B was with us. That's why.
Exactly.
That's it, yeah. It's all going to go downhill today.
Yeah. No pressure, Katie B. No pressure whatsoever. So we did promise that we'd talk about pronouns. So who'd like to kick off and talk about the whole pronouns thing?
I don't mind.
Go on then.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
Go on, Katie Neeves. Do your gobby bit.
I have a reputation to keep up, Taz. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of people sort of say, why do we need to, state our pronouns? And surely they're obvious, but they're not always obvious, because some people have names that are not obvious. So which pronouns to use and which gender they are. So, for instance, Leslie or Joe or Dr. Smith. All those you wouldn't know. And when you meet somebody, you wouldn't necessarily know what their pronouns are. The only way of knowing what gender somebody is if they tell you. You can't guess that by how they sound or how they look, or both. And so it's important, but it's not just important for trans and gender non-conforming people. So it's for everybody. They're not, pronouns just aren't for weird people like me. They are for everybody. And by using them, even if you think it is obvious for you, by using them, as you two have on the name tag on them, it shows that you're supporting the gender non-conforming community, and you're normalizing. By using it, you're normalizing the use of them. And I think that's the main thing, is just to normalize the use of it. So the more people use it, the better. Then it's just not a big deal, and it's just expected that you've got pronouns after your name. It's not a big deal, really. It costs nothing to do it. And it's just a cheap and easy way of showing your support.
I think that's so important to point out, because hands up, way back when this first started to be it's been a thing forever, but when it was more of a public-facing thing, when it first started to be debated, I remember thinking, well, but why? And way back then, I didn't clock, oh, it's to show support. I just thought, why? And I did, because, but I could understand in the early days why so many people were confused about it. Whereas once that penny dropped, and you'd think that would have been an obvious for me, but it just wasn't at first. But I still didn't have any hard and fast, no, we shouldn't. So I think once we recognise that even if we think our own gender is obvious, once we recognise, for me at least, once I recognise actually this is showing solidarity and normalising this for everyone else, then it all suddenly made sense. But I know not everybody thinks like that. There are still people who will bang on and on and on about it, particularly on some of the social channels. I mean, LinkedIn has only relatively recently put it as one of the options when you're filling in your profile, and I cheered when they did so. Well, what do we say when we hear all of these people who are saying things like corporate organizations are forcing people to use pronouns on their name badges, and I shouldn't have to do this, and I don't believe in it? And what do we say then?
Well, I think it's just a reflection on the people who are saying that, isn't it? I think, I don't think anybody should be forced to use it, because there may be there will be some people who, maybe are struggling with their gender and haven't admitted it to themselves. And certainly before I admitted to myself that I was a transgender woman, before I admitted that to myself, if I'd have been forced to put my pronoun down behind my name, I would have put he, him, because I didn't want to out myself and I wasn't ready to admit it. But then that would have been a tough thing to put down. So I think nobody should be forced to use it, but I think everyone should be encouraged to use it. And the more people that use it, the more it normalizes it. And then everybody thinks, oh yeah, it's just not a big deal and it's not a talking point anymore.
Yeah, I think I would echo that as well, just on the kind of mandating the use of pronouns, because that's something that I get asked a lot, is like, should we be mandating this? And it's always something I'd say, well, actually, I don't think mandating is the way to go. It's around educating people and explaining why, because 9 times out of 10, in the nicest possible way, a lot of people just don't care. They will hear, oh, this is something I can do that just makes me just a nicer, kinder person to people around me. Sure, I'm more than happy to do that once they understand why. Yeah. And there's no resistance to it. So obviously, of course, there will always be people who maybe don't understand and need a bit more education or a bit more reassurance. Okay, fine. But yeah, 9 times out of 10 people don't mind, so long as you understand what's being asked of you. So I kind of think it's always that education piece that wants to come first. And then as a business, you can say, so this is why we really strongly encourage people to do this, because this is where we stand. This is our motivation as a business. And most people will be like, yeah, cool, no problem.
Yeah. And when
it's not a thing,
The other argument I've heard a couple of times is that old, oh, right, so we're all being encouraged to do something just to support a minority. And no, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But even if that was the case, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
So what's we make a big thing, don't we, of standing up for the underdog. So many people who get off on that vibe, and yet here's an opportunity. What?
Yeah. But I just think, to your point, like if you cannot know someone's gender just by looking at them or listening to them, or like, why would I not take a step just to remove any confusion and put it out there? Like, for me, it just makes sense. Like, I don't want anyone to be confused. So I'm taking that away from them. It's obvious for you. There it is. This is how you know. I tell you.
And I also can't help thinking that those who don't want that and who fight against it, apart from when we've got, completely understandable cases of confusion, as you were just pointing out, Katie, I think if anybody does not have good reason, I can't think of any reason to kick up against it other than wanting to cause drama and wanting to cause a stir, in which case off you go and lock yourself in a little room with all your copies of Harry Potter and enjoy.
Exactly. And
sorry.
And things for people who are not trans, then gender is just not a big issue to them, and they tend not to be misgendered, and so they just don't really think about it. But they don't really realise the harm that it causes when trans people are misgendered, and also the joy it brings when we are correctly gendered, and people use our, they validate our identity by using our correct pronouns. It feels amazing.
And not just trans people, but intersex people, gender queer people, gender fluid people. There's a whole spectrum of people out there for whom this will support.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I don't tend to get misgendered very often when people see me, but on the phone, I get called sir all the time because I've still got a deep voice, and I understand that. But it's hurtful, but there was one point when I was misgendered in person, face to face, and been a few times. One was about a year and a half ago, and I was in hospital, and I just had a breast augmentation surgery, and so I was in the private hospital because it was not available on the NHS in England and Wales. It is in Scotland, not in England and Wales. Should have moved to Scotland, shouldn't I? Anyway, so I was in this room, and then my room backed onto the nurses' station, and I had a conversation between two nurses, and they were talking about me, and they said so that they were using he/him pronouns, and I was in there for a boob job, for goodness sake. And so when one of the nurses came back in, I said, I overheard everything. He said, I'd be grateful if you could please use she/her pronouns because that's what I use. And she was mortified and she apologized and said, look, I don't blame you, but I do blame the hospital management for not giving you adequate trans awareness training because you should be aware of this. And we ended up having a really nice conversation. And I gave her a sort of a mini trans awareness training session, really, from my hospital bed, just 6 hours. After coming around for a general anaesthetic, I couldn't help myself.
I hope they gave you a testimonial, Katie.
Oh yeah, they should have done. Yeah, but I think they just gave me more morphine.
It works.
It's
smile and say thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm still on it. A year and a half later. Yeah.
So let's just touch on another point there just for a moment. Tracy just put a comment up a moment ago to realise she hadn't got them on her social media, and I think if you haven't got them on your social media, don't worry. In fact, if you watch the first episode of this, I only realised today that where I'd updated the brand, I hadn't got it on my little banner there. I just did it before we went live, so don't feel bad about it. Just do it. But the other area I'd love us to just dip into here is, what advice or support can we give for those situations where maybe somebody has transitioned or is transitioning, and family, friends, loved ones are really struggling to the point of deliberately misgendering frequently? What do we do there?
Okay, I would say help them with it, because it's a bit of a cliche, but we're all on a journey. So trans people are on the journey, but then our loved ones are on a journey as well. And the thing is that for trans people, we've had gender dysphoria that's forcing us to do this, because nobody chooses to be trans. The only choice you have is whether you do anything about it or not. But gender dysphoria, which is a great feeling of unease and distress caused by a mismatch between how we feel in our head and our hearts, or our true gender, as opposed to our primary sex characteristics, what's between our legs and the label that's given at birth. And so we've had that driving us on, and it's horrendous. But our loved ones haven't had that. And so usually the first they know about it is when we've just had enough of it and we just explode and say, this is who I am, this is what I need to do in order to be happy. And we're going at it at 100 miles an hour, but leaving our loved ones behind, floundering. They've had no trans awareness education. And some of them can be hostile because they get drip-fed all the stuff that's in the media and in Parliament and everything. And so they believe all this stuff. And they're right at ground zero. They haven't started on all this, and so you need to help them along with them. And so we need some compassion for our loved ones as well. So just help educate them, and just show that, well, actually most people are lovely people and they don't want to offend, and so just help them to be that lovely person, and just say, well, look, actually by using these correct pronouns, it will bring joy into your loved one's life. But if you don't, it will really hurt them, and it really does hurt. And for people who are not sure of what pronouns to use for people, just ask, because most gender non-conforming people like being asked which pronouns to use, because it shows that you care and you've got a willingness to get it right. Oh, hello. We've got.
So Laura's saying in the chat here, agree with the chat around sharing pronouns, but I find that people don't always actually check and continue to misgender. So that's the next step in pronoun sharing. It's great if you're sharing yours on email, for example, but the point actually is to check others and make sure you're using the right ones for them too. I personally don't find that's happening quite as freely just yet.
Yeah,
Absolutely. People tend to just assume by someone's name or their appearance or their voice or all of them or any of them. Yeah. Absolutely. And the best way to do it is just to, when you introduce yourself, say your pronouns, and then people are much more likely to follow on with theirs.
Yeah, actually, I would say that absolutely happens, because I tend to do that at the start of all of my training sessions, and even some people are a bit but they do it anyway because we want to be included, don't we? We want to kind of do what everybody else is doing, always with the caveat of, and here is why I share them, and then it starts the conversation. But it takes minutes, and then we will move on. But it happens, and everybody knows, and it's that reassurance piece. But I'd really like to just pick up on what you were saying there, Katie, because we answered the question around what do we do when people continually misgender people, when they're kind of your friends and your family and they are on the journey with you and they're learning. But actually, I would say, would we take the same approach with people who continually misgender other people or us when they're doing it intentionally because they know that it's causing harm? Because I think those people can jog on.
I think it's carrot and stick, isn't it? I mean, I saw a lovely comment from Michelle just now, sort of saying I'm so compassionate. I'm not always. I can be a right bitch sometimes.
That's the gobby element, Michelle. That's the gobby element.
Exactly. But no, I think the thing is, you start off by assuming that most people are lovely people and they don't want to offend. So you start off educated, but some people don't want to be educated. And if they don't want to be, well, okay, then you get heavy with them.
I think there's that line, isn't there, where it's probably likely that people that are doing that are less likely to have that developed relationship with you anyway, and wanting to maintain that. And putting a bit of distance and safety between yourself and someone who's behaving that way, and having people that might be witness to that if you're in a workplace, who can kind of come and be your ally in that situation and make sure that you are not alone facing that as well.
Tracy's saying maybe at events where name badges are worn, there should be a space for preferred pronouns. I've seen some events are already doing that. So
perfect.
Or if it's an event where you can write your own on, write that too. I think there's a line, isn't there? There are those who deliberately misgender because, well, for everything you've just been talking about, Katie. But back to the family thing, there are going to be cases. I suppose this isn't just about trans people now, is it? Or those who aren't gender normative. Such a horrible phrase. Let's not use that word ever again. Where it's because our loved ones just haven't come to terms with it yet, and they're struggling with it for whatever reason. And in the same way that, when I came out, there were plenty of my loved ones who just did not want to accept that I was gay. Just didn't want to. And I had lots of things, lots of words and statements levied at me with their idea of proof that I wasn't and I couldn't possibly be. And I suppose it's an extension of that, isn't it? If we get someone who is transitioning or who is choosing to use the different pronouns and choosing to identify with a different gender, and our family members just are not ready to accept that, that's such a massive spectrum, isn't it? Everything from they are never going to, and it's going to cause a split in the family, sadly, through to just education, through to at the other end of the spectrum, us just cutting them a little bit of slack because every now and then they might trip up and it's not deliberate.
Yeah.
So
I've had the full range in my family. The full range. So I mean, I've had big problems with my mum. The first time she saw me as the real me, she said, "What's that? It doesn't belong to me." And she turned her back and walked away from me. It was horrendous. It was a real low point in our relationship. But we've since got a lot better. And at the time, her partner that she was with, and he's since gone into a care home. But the partner that she was with, he was very religious, and he called me abnormal and an aberration, which was nice of him. It's lovely. But the trouble is, he was in her ear the whole time, so he was dragging it back. But then he's off the scene, and then what actually improved things was COVID and lockdown, actually, because she hasn't got the internet access or anything, and hasn't got a smartphone or anything. So the only contact I could, because I couldn't go and see her in lockdown, so the only contact I could have was my phone. So from day one of of the very first lockdown. I said, right, well, I'll just phone you every day, and that's what I've done, and I've done ever since. In fact, straight as soon as we finish this, I'll jump on the phone to in a minute. But that has actually improved our relationship. But then, unfortunately, now she's got dementia, she's got Alzheimer's, and so now she, without fail, she will misgender me, and she uses he/him pronouns, and she'll call me my old name, which was Martin. Yeah, every day without fail. But I know that that's her dementia talking, and it's not her, and so she's the only person who I allow to get away with that.
Yeah.
But then the other end of it, my sister is a very evangelical, born again Christian, and she doesn't want to know me now. So apparently, that's incompatible with having a trans sibling. But there you go.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. There was some awful situations with my wife, because her family are very religious, and been some awful issues just with us being together, which means that there's a massive wedge in there too.
It's awful, isn't it?
It's respect. It is, but it's a respect thing, isn't it? I mean, even with, so my wife Asha changed her name legally. She's not trans. She just needed to have a new start, and felt part of that for her, and stepping into her power was changing her name. She kept her middle name out of respect to her mum and dad, but she changed her first name. And there are people I know who insist on referring to her still as Alison, and it doesn't matter how much she's been Asher for years and years and years now, or whenever you try to pick them up on it, no, she'll always be Ali to me. So it's, and I know that's a different thing, but it's still on that respect scale, isn't it? Surely, however somebody wants to be known, wants to identify, we should respect that, whether it's a name, whether it's a gender. If somebody went and dyed their hair a different colour, we wouldn't insist that that's not that they're always going to be blonde to me, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
For me, though, what I'm hearing all of this, it's where who are we centering in these conversations? Yeah, and it is coming from a place of me. Well, I see the world in this way. This is the way everything needs to be for me. So you all have to fit me, rather than us stopping and thinking we're all individual people, and you are important, and Asha is important. Yeah. And I want to put you in the heart of that. Yeah. And I want to do everything in my power to make you feel loved and you feel seen. And like you said, Taz, that respect piece, but really about, it's not about us. It's not about us. It's about the people that we're interacting with. And
this comes in beautifully to your TED Talk, doesn't it? If anyone hasn't yet watched Katie's TED Talk, go look that up.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's about how do we step out of that me mindset, and then the whole premise of it is talking about me. I'm comfortable being me. I know what I need, and then there is us, which is the group of people whom I'm really easy to associate with. They're like me. We all get the same thing. And then there's we, which is everybody, and how are we pushing through those boundaries to see everybody in the way that they wish to be seen, not in the way that is most comfortable for me. Yeah.
All right, let's look at some of our comments. We have another one from Michelle. If I could get it, there we are. I was going to ask if you get exhausted by it, or any EDIB work is exhausting, isn't it? Because it's constant. How do we all feel about that? Is it exhausting?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it. But so often you end up being asked the same questions, and sometimes it's like beating your head against a brick wall, and and I mean, obviously when I'm actually going there and I'm presenting a session or whatever, or a talk or whatever, I'm there to do that anyway, and so that's fine, and I absolutely love it. But I think it's just constantly after, like, on social media the whole time, when someone bombards you with the whole stuff. I mean, it's with on for trans people, it's always the same stuff. It's sport, bogs, and kids every time. You think, oh, here we go again. And they say the same old stuff over and over again, and so it's just it is tiring. It really is. And the trouble is, so many people have got really strong opinions about trans people, and yet I've never actually. A lot of them haven't knowingly met a trans person or spoken to one, or actually, talk to us, just ask us, about stuff, and yet they've got these really strong opinions about us, and you need to talk to trans people, and we're not these other beings. We're just ordinary people who want to be happy. That's all it is.
Yeah. And I would add to that to say, absolutely, doing the work is exhausting, but doing the work, I guess from my position, is that what is more exhausting than however I might feel about this is being on the receiving end of transphobia, being on the receiving end of racism, being on the receiving end of ableism, of all of the discrimination that's out there. That's exhausting.
Yeah.
And that is relentless. And that is why no matter how tired I get, and yes, I do have to take care of myself and I do have to take a step back and do that good work, because otherwise you're no good to anybody. I will never be as exhausted as everybody who cannot take a step back. And I'm always, always very conscious of that, you know, I can take a step back, but I have to step back in again.
It's such an important point to make. I think for me, any piece of work where we are facilitating a discussion or facilitating growth and shifting mindset, which aren't always comfortable for people, and where there might be resistance, is going to be exhausting. And I think that's, again, you touched on it just, Katie, that's where we all need to learn to protect our energy a little bit more and learn when to pull back and when we need to just go and hole up in a room somewhere and take care of ourselves and just be self-care is huge. But absolutely there's a scale of exhaustion too, isn't there? So however exhausted we might feel.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Katie.
So I was just going to say, and then the intersection of exhaustion, because nothing happens in a vacuum, right? And it's a shame that, you know, Katie B's not here to add her experience into the mix as well, because all of the, you know, the discriminations and these situations that people face, they layer up as well. So it's the intersection of exhaustion. I don't know if that's a new term, but
maybe that's your next TED talk.
No, but we have to acknowledge that, don't we? That if you are a Black trans woman with a disability, you know, you are definitely gonna feel all of that. So we have to be really mindful of that too.
We really do. Okay, so there's quite another big topic we need to be beautifully segueing into. Segues, that's such a lovely word, isn't it? We need to be moving into
Can we get on a segue?
Have you ever ridden one of those?
No.
They're brilliant fun.
Are they?
They're great.
Somebody I know ended up in hospital after crashing, went into a tree. I've always quite fancied doing it.
I can understand that. Yeah, they're really weird, and because you lean forward to go forward, and then you pull back to stop, but it's really weird because you don't normally lean forward, because if you lean forward normally you just fall over, and so you're putting your center of balance forward. It's really weird to begin with. Getting off is the most strange thing. It's just we
should do a Proud Women Adventure Day though. Maybe we should do that too.
I was just thinking we need a Proud Women parade that involves some segues.
Segues, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. No, they're great fun.
So moving on, dare I mention the words parliamentary and debate?
Oh, yeah, I suppose you must.
It would be conspicuous by its absence, I guess, wouldn't it? Who'd like to pick up on this one and explain what we're talking about for anyone watching who has no idea?
Do you want me to?
I think Katie, please, because I think.
Yeah. Oh, this week. So on Monday there was a parliamentary debate, and it was an e-debate. So it was basically triggered from an e-petition. Well, in fact, two e-petitions. There was one e-petition to Parliament asking for it to be debated that the word sex was redefined as biological sex in the Gender Recognition Act 2004. Sorry, no, wrong law. It's the Equality Act.
Equality Act, yeah.
Sorry, so it's the other one, because there are two laws that affect trans people, and I got the wrong one. So the Equality Act 2010. And then there was a converse, so that got just over 100,000 votes, and then there was another e-debate that countered that got about 140,000 votes. I think it was 160, but it was more anyway. Just basically saying no, leave the Equality Act 2010 as it is. Now I'll explain basically the significance of that, because you might think, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. You're only adding one word. But it's significant. Basically, it was something that was started from Suella Braverman wrote to the EHRC, so the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, to ask for their advice about changing this. Now, Suella Braverman's got a history of being very trans hostile, and unfortunately, the EHRC has two now. All the trans friendly people have left, and it's headed up by their chairman. Has been proved to be very trans hostile. So Baroness Faulkner. And the advice that she gave back was that, oh yes, just change it, clarify it, just change it to biological sex. But that is not, to change that wouldn't be a clarification. It would be a change, and then that would have to go through the full rigors of Parliament to do it. But it would have very serious effects for trans people, and it would clash with the other act that I mentioned by mistake earlier on, the Gender Recognition Act 2004. And it would mean, so basically the clarification that they said they meant, because there's no legal definition of biological sex, because biology affects all of your body, not just your genitalia. And the thing is that when a baby's born, you're not actually born with this label, you're actually given this label depending on what your genitals look like. Things in this country, it's a binary choice. So the doctor or midwife can only say boy or girl. They can't put anything else. But nature is very messy. It doesn't like binary things. It likes a whole range of things. And so many people have an extra chromosome. It's not straightforward as XX and XY chromosome. You can have actually up to 5 chromosomes, and that's just entirely normal, perfectly natural. And so many people are what's called intersex, and they can have this extra chromosome. And the different ways that it can show itself. One way could be that it could the baby could have genitalia that is non-defined, and so it's not obvious which sex they are, and so they get put down. The way that they determine it is by measuring the genitalia, and if it's over a certain size, they get labelled as a boy. If it's under a certain size, they get labelled as a girl. In other instances, they can't decide, and so they actually give that they give the choice to the parents based on what? Yeah, and then that can often be followed up by plastic surgery to the genitalia, to what's seen as correct the genitals. Which is gender reassignment surgery on children against their wishes. There's no consent involved at all.
No.
Absolutely horrendous. And this is going on to this day on the NHS. This is happening now. Yeah. And other ways it can show itself could be that, for instance, the baby could have a vagina, but then they could also have internal testes. Of course, the internal testes can't be seen, and so they get put down as a girl, and it's not until later on in life the internal testes are discovered when they're having internal scans. So it's important to explain that this is what intersex is. It's got nothing to do with gender. This is just about sex. But this affects more people than you think. It's just under 2% of the population, which is roughly about the same number of people who've got ginger hair in the UK. Not necessarily the same people, but it's just but that's enough to quantify. So it's important to sort of show that this is not it's not a binary thing, and in many countries such as Germany, there's a choice of 3 on the birth certificate. You can have boy, girl, or other, and so it's this is something that's not uniform everywhere. There's a binary thing, and so the problem is with this act, it's very much about this binary thing, and just trying to sort of force people to just conform to what's on the birth certificate and only recognise that. And the trouble is, if that's the case, then it would negate all the gender recognition certificates that have been given to trans people, under the Gender Recognition Act 2004. So it would clash with that, and also then it would then basically legalise transphobia. That's what it would do, because at the moment the Equality Act allows trans people and gender non-conforming people to use whatever gender appropriate spaces they identify with and feels right for them, and that's exactly how it should be. But the trouble is that all this is whipping up hate and whipping up the gender police, and lots of gender non-conforming people get challenged when they use the loos that don't
that
on the
other
face of
people
it,
don't think.
that other people don't
Yeah.
think that they should be going in. And I'm quite lucky that I've never been challenged when I've used the ladies' loos. But then I've got lots of butch lesbian friends who are cisgender, so they're not trans, but they often get challenged when they use the loos and stuff. So, and this is that's just going to increase that, and
Yeah.
because there's no way of checking. No way of
Yeah.
checking.
Well, I was curious to ask Katie, and hopefully this is okay for me to ask.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, if they did clarify the Equality Act in this way, would that then mean that if you were to use a public loo, you would be forced to use a man's toilet?
Yeah. Now this is So if I was to keep within the law, then I would be forced to use the gents' loos. Well, think how
horrendous about the whole thing.
But then you're thinking for the men in that space.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then it's going to go into changing rooms or everything.
But then it goes the other way. Trans men would then be forced to use the women's loos, and trans men, most trans men, you wouldn't know they were trans because they it's a horrible word, but pass, and so they most of them end up growing facial hair because it's an obvious masculizing thing to do. Their voices break very, very quickly within being on about 3 weeks of being on testosterone. Their voices start to break. Unfortunately, it doesn't work the other way, and so that's why I still got a deep voice. But it
feels so horribly destructive for everybody, doesn't it? And unnerving for everybody, because we're back to that question. Well, you're not going to, you can't go checking what people have got in their pants before we go to the toilet.
Way back to the Stonewall Riot.
Anybody can walk with anybody in anywhere, and how would we really know?
Yeah,
Tracy Blum is asking what impacts this would have on the penal system.
Yeah, good question. Can I come to that in a minute?
Please do.
So again, so you couldn't check. You wouldn't have the genital police checking people's genitals going. And the thing is that for trans people who've had lower surgery anyway,
what does it
exactly wouldn't tell anyway. But then check the birth certificate. Well, for trans people who've got gender recognition certificates, they've got new birth certificates anyway. So again, you wouldn't be able to tell. And a birth certificate isn't a valid form of ID. And I could get hold of either of your two birth certificates and say, well, that's. So again, it's
the whole thing feels so nonsensical.
Yeah.
When you think about not just,
and horribly contrived.
Yeah. There are the wider political agenda, I think, really, which is what the undercurrent here is.
Yeah.
If we just put that to one side and think about the specific issue at hand of what this is supposed to solve, which is from what I heard in the debate, the safety of single-sex spaces for women, that seemed to be the predominant conversation topic.
Yeah.
This almost makes it worse. From my understanding, it makes it worse. It makes everything so confusing and so difficult.
What do they mean by safety?
Well, right.
So protecting from what?
Yeah.
We just want a wee in safety just as much as you do.
But because then I was also thinking around, like you say, if you are the victim of a crime, and so under the Equality Act, say, or at work under the Equality Act, you've got protected characteristics. So if you were the victim of sexual harassment at work, and you wanted to raise a claim, but then actually, if I'm a victim of sexual harassment from a man, but now you're telling me that under the new act I'm now legally a man, then actually am I now no longer a victim of sexual harassment?
No,
now am I no longer protected because it's not a protected character? And you just think,
exactly. So it would have that consequence as well. It's horrendous. So Tracy was asking about what effect it would have on the penal system. It would have no effect at all, none whatsoever. So let me explain. So basically, when a trans prisoner is taken into prison, they get assessed. It's basically an assessment, just to sort of a risk assessment, just to see what danger they are to anybody else, and that's correct. That's absolutely correct, because nobody else wants to be in danger from them. And so what happens? So often the case of, let's look at the case of Isla Bryson, for instance, up in Scotland, because that's the one that is always thrown up. So I don't know whether she is a transgender woman or not. She says she is, so I will respect what she says, and I will use she, her pronouns because that's what she asked to use, and that's absolutely fine. So because I have no way of knowing any other way, so that's what she asked for. That's fine. So initially she went into the female estate, but she was in solitary confinement, so no other female inmates were put in contact with her at all. She was a serial sex offender, and so when they did her risk assessment, yes, she absolutely was a danger to the other inmates, and so she was then moved to the male estate. However, that got her away from it. So at no point were the other inmates in contact with her or in any danger from her. You think, okay, well, that's fine. However, you've got to think about it. There are thousands of cisgender, so non-trans, female sex offenders, and they are all serving time within the female estate. So what do they do with them? Where do they put them? Surely trans women who are a danger to cisgender women, surely they should deal with them in the same way. It seems very unfair. It seems to be all based on transphobia to me.
But it almost feels, doesn't it, a lot like all of these conversations, they're not really the conversation about the issue at heart, which is, what is the actual problem with the situation? It's just around what's the label that we're attaching, as if that has any bearing on what it is. Because,
So the thing is, it's about, so Isla Bryson wasn't a danger to the female inmates because she was trans. She was a danger because she was a serial sex offender. But the thing is, with all those thousands of cisgender female sex offenders, they're not going to be moved to the male estate because they're a danger to the women. And what about male sex offenders who attack men? Are they going to be moved to the female estate? That's not going to happen, is it? It's all a bit
such nonsense.
That's not right, really, is it?
Something as well, in listening to the debate that stood out for me was this need to want to, and you said it earlier, Katie, about to bring children into it, as if we must protect the children, and I found it really interesting.
The pawns in the game.
Sorry.
The pawns in the game, otherwise described as children.
Exactly, the pure innocents who are going to be sullied by all of these goings on.
Yeah.
And what really kind of stood out for me, I think at one point, it was the reference to being, exposed to a penis. The 6-year-old child was going to be exposed to a penis, I think was what we were talking about. And I just thought, is that what we're kind of worried about? Like, now, I do a lot of sports. I've done a lot of exercise. I spent a lot of time in women's changing rooms. And we're all naked, but we're not like doing the hula and wangling everything around. We're just getting on with our business, getting dry, having a shower, getting changed. Like, we're just doing our thing. And I kind of just think like we just have bodies. And so if we know that in that space we are all women, and I think maybe this is the crux of the issue, in that I accept and wholeheartedly believe trans women are women, so I can completely understand in that space there will be a woman with a penis. And if I have a child with me, then is this not the opportunity where we have a conversation about some women have vaginas, some women have penises, and there is just this open conversation, and we don't turn it into this, you're lurking behind a cupboard with a penis. It's just, you're getting changed.
But the thing is that if there is a trans woman in there with a penis, so either pre-op or non-op, it's most likely that she will be very, very conscious of that, and she will not want anybody to see that, and she will do her utmost.
Is she?
No. She will do her utmost best to hide that, because there's no way she'd want that. Because most trans people will actually want to have that privacy of being in a cubicle by themselves, so that they've got the privacy, so that nobody sees what's down there. It's just ridiculous.
And that's
all kind of overly sexualized, isn't it? Everything they have to try. But in that case, here's just to take it a little bit further. If they're trying to turn this always into a sexual issue that does not exist, what about lesbians in changing rooms and female toilets, or bisexual women in? Does that mean that we shouldn't be? I could be looking at somebody's boobies. You know, what? Why does it?
I mean,
for the record, I'm not. I'm too busy trying to hide my own. But you know,
the trouble is, we're all. It's that dance, isn't it, of trying to keep your towel up on. Like, we're all doing it because it's such fucking nonsense, isn't it?
And you go to most places like swimming pools and that, most modern swimming pools and that most of them have gender neutral changing rooms, so they're just all cubicles anyway. And so that's the way forward. That's what it should be. Yeah. It's only the older places that tend not to be, and I never liked those anyway. I never liked some communal changing rooms. So, yeah.
It did make me chuckle though. This guy, like, well, you could be exposed to a penis, and it was almost like in the Victorian days, like, whoa, mind my eyes, don't show an ankle, like, you know, like, oh no.
You were exposed to a penis when he stood up to speak. Oh no. That's it. I couldn't. It was really triggering.
Where's the like button? Come on, people, like.
Watching that debate was just horrendous. It was really triggering for a trans person to actually watch that, because there was all this hate and all this misinformation that was being pumped out there by these people who are completely anti-trans, and whether it was because they're just completely uneducated about it. So I'm sure a lot of them were, but a lot of them were just full of this hate, and it was awful. It really was. And just to see this being played out there, it was awful. And there were far more trans hostile MPs in that debate than there were trans friendly MPs, and some weren't even allowed to speak. So people like Mary Black, who's amazing MSP, she's phenomenal, and they announced her name, and I thought, and I sat up, I thought, this will be good. She's brilliant. And then they said, oh no, we've got it the wrong way around. It's somebody else now. And so she wasn't allowed to speak. And then they ran out of time in the debate. And unfortunately, she wasn't allowed to speak. Such a shame.
Yeah.
We are almost on time. We could talk about this till the cows come home. And there's so much stuff to talk about this. There was the other the piece we were discussing in our group chat as well about the trials for gender reassignment. We need to be talking about all of those in a different one, but probably won't have time to do it all today. I want to just quickly touch on some of the points in the comments. There's one comment here that I'm not going to put the whole thing on screen because it's a very, very long comment, but there's just a couple of points I want to pick up on it. As a lady Janet said, I seem to have joined this almost by accident. I'm fairly traditional, so this debate probably has little relevance to me. I would say actually this debate absolutely does have relevance to you, and I don't know about anyone else, and I'm sure this is not the case here, but I always get a little bit of a shiver and a little concern when people start talking about traditional values, because it has been used as a veil for homophobia so many times. When you have to go back to some of the political comments in the past, particularly things around Section 28, and when it was referred to anything other than a relationship between a man and a woman being a pretended family relationship. Yeah. So I'm absolutely sure this lady didn't mean it in that way. So I'm not aiming this at you, Janet. This is just generally speaking. Traditional for me gives me the willies, because
they're overrated, Taz.
Apparently so, unless they're in a changing room. So what does that mean? Because at one point, slavery was traditional. At one point, capital punishment was traditional.
Tradition is what we make it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think we need to be really, really careful around the use of that word traditional. I find a lot of people who are using faith as an argument against equality are using traditional, and I think we're genuinely, my personal opinion, I think we're moving to a point really where faith-based prejudice really deserves to be nowhere other than the bin, because I don't think we should be able to pick and choose which pieces of scripture we want to adhere to. And until you all want to stop having tattoos and stop eating shellfish, I think we need to be moving on from that. But the other point that I really wanted to pick up on here is one of her points was about pronouns. So just to bring the debate round, she says, the pronoun issue to me is boring to me because it's just celebrities who seem to want attention. We have titles, Mr., Mrs., Miss, Ms. Using these makes it easy to identify if you're male or female, and personally, that's who we are. If I'm talking on the phone and given a name which could be either male or female, I ask, i.e. Sam, Chris, Robin, Jamie, and there are others, names such as Lindsay or Leslie, which have different spellings for male or female, but again, it seems people choose which spelling they want now. Incidentally to me, I'm only interested in you as a person, not whether you're gay, trans, ethnic origin, skin colour or anything else. And I think on the surface, thank you so much for bringing this into the debate, Janet, because I'm sure there'll be lots of people who are caught on that point. I think the first thing I would say, and I'll open this up to the Katies as well, is it absolutely isn't just celebrities wanting attention, although I am hearing that line peddled a lot by people who are often traditional and are just trying to close the debate down and belittle people for wanting to actually create a free and equitable and equal world for everyone. And as for whether I just see you as a person, I think that's problematic too. And one of the things I really love is that we're trying to educate and help people here, and seeing people as that's as problematic as people who say they don't see colour. So
that was it.
I'm going to hand over to Katie Allen for this one.
I'm kind of itching for this one because, I think, but thank you for asking it. The question.
Absolutely, it was great.
Janet, thank you.
So thank you so much, Janet.
Yeah, because I think it is an interesting topic. But from my perspective, of course, we all want to be seen as people. I mean, as you always say, Katie, we're all just people. We're just people, and we want to be happy. Exactly. But part of being seen as a person is being seen as a whole person. Yeah. And we have to see, and I mean really see who we are. We have to see our gender. We have to see our race. We have to see our ethnicity. We have to see all of these aspects that make us who we are. Otherwise, we are denying the existence of them. And to that point when people say, "Oh, I don't see color," I mean, you do. You're looking at each other. We do see it, but what we're kind of saying is I don't acknowledge that there's a difference. And there is, because we are all treated differently based upon these characteristics that we have. And to not acknowledge that and to not see that is denying that you are seeing that person as a whole, is my take on it. So when I want to be seen, I want to be seen as all of the parts of me. And that does include my sexuality. It does include my gender. I have to see my own whiteness in order to be able to respect the fact that I have privileges that other people don't. So we have to see and be seen.
Absolutely.
Wholly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I suppose all I can say is that, well, pronouns mean an awful lot to me, and I'm not a celeb. So, and they make
not yet.
I'm working on it.
You are, Katie, you are.
LinkedIn top voices. Hello.
Yeah, but surely, Katie, are you not just looking for attention?
Oh, of course. Ridiculous.
I mean, that is true.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just pronouns are so important. They make such a difference, and it really does hurt when people misgender us, and it really does make it a huge difference. So please try. It will really. The thing is, you want to be nice to people. It feels great to make people feel good, and it will really make their day if you use the correct pronouns. It's a lovely thing to do. It's a positive thing to do, and it doesn't cost anything to do it either.
It costs nothing to be kind, does it?
No, not at all.
I think there's so much around language that we need to be far more aware of these days, particularly as we move into the future. And again, the whole thing around being traditional, we just need to be so careful, because there will be perceptions around that. For me, that very easily slides into the whole hate the sin, love the sinner point, and there is no sin. So but then we go into opinions again, don't we? I remember years and years ago, before same-sex marriage was legalized. That's another thing. I heard so many people say, "Oh, gay marriage," or as I call it, marriage. Before same-sex marriage was legalized, Asher and I had a commitment ceremony in a church in Florida, of all places. Can you believe it? With a wonderful lady whose name was the Reverend Marnie Harmony, her real name, and she wore a rainbow stole, and she was lovely. And because we'd only talked to her online, she brought us both back into her little office and had the pre-chat with us. And she said, "Have you seen this pamphlet?" And she waved this pamphlet, and the title on the pamphlet was everything Jesus said about homosexuality. And I said, I haven't, no. And she said, well, I'll give you my copy. And she handed it to me, and I opened it, and it was blank. And that has stuck with me forever and a day. So I think we need to be moving into a time where we accept people for who they are, for who they choose to be, for how they choose to identify. And when it comes to the number of faiths out there, where in old scripture that has been translated multiple times and interpreted as there being any kind of issue with people who identify differently to what you are used to, we need to accept that times have moved on from there. We need to accept that we don't take everything we see in scripture at face value, do we? So in order for us all to move together as a people, and for all to be able to respect and understand and love each other, including us feeling safe around different faiths, we all need to be able to park the bits that just don't peddle anything other than hate and ignorance anymore. Yeah. And we need to be able to find the middle ground.
Including people of different faiths.
Yes.
Around people of different faiths.
Precisely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, if only we could shed that, if only we could find a way for everyone of every belief system to stop demonizing one another and to find that middle ground, because we will not ever be able to genuinely get to a place where we have far more peace in the world until people with polar opposite views are willing and able to stop seeing each other as evil or other and start to find the middle ground and start to park the bits of old, outdated scriptures that just no longer appropriate for a more educated, intelligent, and modern world.
I think we're all just different, and let's celebrate our differences. Because wouldn't it be a boring world if we were all the same? I mean, it's just,
wouldn't it?
Yeah, bring some colour into the world, and it's fine. Yeah.
Wow, that got deep quickly, didn't it?
Okay, it did,
we'll have a quick look through the comments. Michelle's saying thank you so much. Oops, sorry, I double clicked you, Michelle. I was trying to love you. Thank you so much. This has been a great chat. I can't talk today. New retainers, they're driving me mad. It's been a great talk to be able to have and drop in on. Binnett, I'm going to guess what she was referring to there. What have we got here? Pronouns are important. It's just difficult when you're still trying to figure out what fits and sounds right. There feels a lot of pressure to have an answer. Absolutely. I can concur with that. I'm sure we all will.
Yeah.
And if I can just add on, sorry, I was just going to say the easiest way to get over that kind of trying to figure out what sounds right and feels right, if you are the person saying and using pronouns you're not used to, is just use them. Yeah. I went through a process of just defaulting to they all of the time for everybody, just to get my face used to saying it. And now it's become really easy.
And the thing is, if you're not sure, and before you are sure, and before they tell you, if you use they them, you can't insult anybody because they them is not offensive to anyone, because that covers everyone.
Oh, I bet I could find somebody who'd been insulted by they them.
And just on for the people that want to say, but they them is for plurals. That's for people. Well, okay, but when you want to come into my kitchen and there's a cake on the side, but you don't know it's my kitchen, but you want a slice of my cake, you're not going to say, whose cake is that? You know, do you think he, him will mind? You're going to say, whose cake is that? Do you think they'll mind? And you're not referring to multiple people. You're referring to one.
Oh, beautifully put.
So, you know, whose bag is that over there? You know, do they know it's there? We use it for singular all the time.
Yeah, and also if you're referring to someone like Dr. Smith, you don't know what their name is.
Exactly.
Sorry, what their gender is.
What's their first name? You know,
what's the first?
You'd say there, wouldn't you?
You're using there. Then in that case.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
All the time.
And you know, try things on if you're not sure. There's one of my friends moved from in the space of about a year, went from he, him to she, they to she, her to they, them. And at the moment, they seem to have settled on they, them, and that's fine by me, except that I've had to ask them to cut me a bit of slack when I've said the wrong one because there's been so many in a short space of time. But they're just working out what fits them at the moment and where they want to be. And,
exactly.
And that's okay.
And that is often very much a journey, as you both know my story. I went on this whole journey, and at one point I just didn't know what gender I was at all, and I thought I was gender fluid at one point, and before I realised I was a woman, and so I had to, I had to go on this journey, and so a lot of people do go on that journey. It does take time, and so often on that journey, their pronouns will change. So that's why it's not because they can't make their mind up. It's just they're working it out. They're working it out. They're working it out, and it does take time.
And if anyone wants a top hack, which I think is perfectly okay to use, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. Especially when we're doing Zoom calls and having conversations, I find sometimes if I'm speaking to someone who is gender fluid, so I know the pronouns that they use, but they may appear in a different way that might mess my brain up. I stick myself a post-it note on my screen with their pronouns on in big letters, so that I can make the effort to use the right pronouns, because I know they haven't changed. They are still who they are. It's my brain that's trying to trip me up, and I'm going to take steps to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's okay. If you need to have prompts and pointers, just make those things visible for you and do that. Make it easier for yourself. A little bit more difficult, obviously, when you're face to face, but you can
put the post-it note on their forehead.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's really, really important. And again, we need to remember that, as we've touched on before, if you've known somebody for years and years and years and they are transitioning or they're changing their pronouns, of course, every now and then you might trip up. And I'm sure, so long as that's a genuine mistake and you apologise straight away or you catch yourself, they won't mind. But we also need to remember that intention is not an excuse, and we can have the best intentions and still cause harm. So let's just remember that too. Having the best intentions is never an excuse for hurting anybody else.
Could
but
be
we just need to do our best. Absolutely, yeah. Right, I think we've put the world to rights quite nicely today. So we're going to be back again on Tuesday, 6 p.m. Same place, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, all over the place. We're spreading ourselves as widely as we can. If you've enjoyed this, if you think it's useful, then please, please, please give us a share. If there's a topic you particularly want us to dig into next time, then please, please, please let us know. And remember, this is LGBTQIA+. We've been quite trans heavy today because of the news and because pronouns, but it's not just trans, it's everything on that big rainbow spectrum. So if there's anything at all you want us to pick up on, then please, please, please let us know, and we will do our best next time. One last thank you from Claire. Thank you everyone for watching. Yeah, hearts.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Stay on the line, ladies, or we'll have a quick chat before we end. Thanks everybody. See you soon.
Bye everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Enjoy your weekend.
Bye.